So I'm just warning you all, we may have to stop abruptly in the middle of our chat today because cameraman Darren Morash may have to run out of the room because his wife may be giving birth. At any moment, she's overdue and we're just all waiting, so.
Stand camera fall.
Darren will make.
If it falls to the right, it's a boy. If it falls to the left, it's a girl.
Exactly. So yes, we'll have our fingers crossed that the baby comes today. Darren's acting a little squirrely because he's waiting for his first kid to come along, and I think that would make anybody a little squirrely. So so hopefully Chantel gives birth today.
This is our my day in the office pool too.
Oh, is it? Eh? Okay. How much are you gonna win? $6, $7?
If that.
I thought you said it was your day. It was like, what?
By the way, yeah.
Keep that one a secret.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of real big talkers in the news the past few days, and stuff that actually started locally. The first big one that I wanted to throw on the table here today is the story that's coming out of Morris, Manitoba, and this has made national headlines. A gay couple runs a restaurant there called Pots and Hands. They've been running it for a few months, but they were just kind of under the radar, and it came out recently, pardon the pun, that they are a gay couple, and it's caused quite an uproar in Morris. In particular, a couple of fairly vocal proprietors of other businesses there, and I guess not necessarily proprietors, but just town folk, have come out and said in the newspaper and other forms of media that this is awful, they shouldn't be running a restaurant, kind of how dare they. There were some really asinine and preposterous comments made about who knows what's going on in their kitchen, as if to say something. Anyway.
Who knows what's going on in anybody's kitchen?
Exactly. But anyway, this has caused a huge uproar, and rightfully so. The topic of homophobia is now front and center. And unfortunately for the town of Morris, they're being painted with a big, wide homophobic brush, which obviously shouldn't be, because not everybody in town shares those opinions. In fact, tons of support has now swelled for this couple, but they've decided they're going to close their restaurant because frankly, they just don't want to have to deal with that. And they've moved. They came to Morris, they settled in Morris, and they've lived in other cities in Canada, and that's where they picked to go, and that's the reception they got.
You know, and let's face it, it's not just Morris, it's this whole sort of Bible Belt, it's commonly known as, and there's some great, wonderful people in those areas, open-minded, wonderful people. But just a few months ago too, the issue with the school not wanting to have
a gay-straight alliance
poster, alliance groups, right? And I mean, so this is something that's going to be continued to come out, and to feel as though that you're allowed to just be a bigot publicly. Yeah. How did this happen? How did we get to the point where
freedom of speech, right?
It's freedom of speech, but what about? I mean, there are laws against hate crimes, and how is this any different? Yeah. It blows my mind that this is somehow considered different than a hate crime, which would be based on race, right? How is this different? This is exactly the same, and I think in 20 or 30 years, we're going to look back and we're going to go like this. We're going to be so embarrassed that this actually happened in our province.
Well, the one person who came out and made the most egregious comment was a proprietor of a different restaurant, George's, in Morris, and there's been quite a backlash against him, and because his comments were, there was no misinterpretation of what he said. He was implying that because it was a gay couple, that they are maybe having, I can't say it on a family show, but we know what's implied. What?
We should probably mention first, before we get into this, that this is George's in Morris, and this does not reflect on any other
and that's a good point. Absolutely.
So there are many of them in the city.
That's right.
But I mean, they assume that would happen in the kitchen. It's not like gay people are the only people that have that sort of fun.
Yes.
You know? Well, wait, there's a straight couple that owns a restaurant? What are they doing in the kitchen? You know?
But
they're probably making burgers.
In this day and age, how is someone so uneducated? Or, it blows my mind. I don't even have words.
It's like not even it's not a matter of education. It's a matter of being in an environment where they obviously feel very comfortable coming forward with these very hateful things to say. That's what makes me the most nervous and most upset. And I grew up in a small town, and Mitchell, you were too far away from me. But certainly there is.
Oftentimes there are people in the town that are you don't want to say celebrity, but they have kind of that level of opinion that seems to sway a lot of people, and
no one wants to go up against them.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's the deal. We all feel very strongly about this. I mean, it's totally preposterous that it happens now. What do we do to move ahead? How do we, I guess, re-educate these people that really need to open their eyes and see people like that. Like, what do we do? I mean, maybe the couple should stay there in Morris, but really, at the end of the day, it's their happiness, right?
Yeah.
Why should they?
have to go through
Yeah.
Why should they have to go through any more? And I understand that. But then again, why should that deter any other different couples of any other sexual orientation from moving to maybe not Morris, but any other small town? Like there's that all of a sudden, well, where do I go? And there has to be a sense of community. And obviously these people in Morris have a sense of their own community. But how do we educate them?
It's a tough,
I don't know. Or
It's a
let
tough
them
thing because
know.
I feel like, you know, growing up in small towns, myself, like several small towns actually, mostly white folk.
Yeah.
The towns that were white folk, and the first few sort of immigrants that came in, there was a lot of racism. But I saw that change as the community changed. But it's different than that because you're coming from a biblical place, and people who have something to point to every time, whether they're misinterpreting or whatever. Or just quoting something. Okay, well, let's not get into that. I won't go there. But I mean, you know, they can keep pointing to that fundamental belief. How do you re-educate that?
The interesting, though, you have to know, obviously, there's just as many people living in Winnipeg that have these same ideas. It just happens that they're surrounded by 700,000 other people and they can hide, right?
They know not to say it publicly.
Maybe they
I mean,
don't,
at
though.
least
They're
that's
not,
comforting.
but they don't always. I think it's that it happened to be that a reporter from a small town newspaper who, you know, walking around asking people, I think you're not necessarily going to have that opportunity in the big city in the same way, right? Like it just so happens in a small town you're, as you know, under a microscope. Everyone is, because there's fewer people, really. You don't have as many people to hide around. But interesting that you mentioned like race too, that I think some of those, some of those attitudes do still exist. Small town, big city, and yeah, they don't have biblical, you know, things to point to, but it's I heard something on the radio recently talking about gay athletes and how, you know, again, in 10, 15 years, it's going to be very different. And partially because the generation of people who really don't understand homosexuality because it was so hidden to their generation for so long, they're dying off. And that in a couple more generations from now, this isn't even going to be a conversation because people of our generation who get it, not that everyone's tolerant just because they're from our generation, but that you're going to have a larger majority of people who at least understand it. They may not like it, but they at least get it.
See, I don't know if that's true. And fundamental Christianity is not going anywhere. And as long as you believe that the Bible is front and center, God's honest truth, it says clearly in there that it's wrong.
It kills me that people can just take the Bible and just interpret whatever they want out of it. There are so many things that if you read the Bible word for word and took it at face value, like shellfish, you can't eat shellfish.
Right.
But these people are condemning homosexuality while shoving shrimp in their face. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can take it to mean whatever you want. And I think it's time that we sort of started to encourage a reinterpretation.
I saw an interesting graphic on, I think it was on Facebook yesterday. You can marry your own cousin in more states in America than you can marry your homosexual partner. Like, seriously.
Absolutely.
It was a fantastic graphic where you saw the state. There's the purple states were the ones that you can just flat out marry your cousin, and then the pink states on this this colorful map were the ones where under certain circumstances you can, and then the yellow states were the ones where you can marry your partner, and there was two.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
going back to the point. I think it was Kim that made it. You know, 30 years ago or whatever, we would just. It might have even been Jay. 30 years ago, when racism was the big thing, there was another picture that I saw on Facebook. It's like, you know, 30 years ago, you know, it showed people with signs talking about race and all this kind of stuff, you know, and then now it says, you know, 2020. This kind of
how
thing.
embarrassed
this
would
kind
you
of
be? The idea
argument.
that we're so embarrassed that took place. Exactly, sort of like what you
There
said.
also might be too the idea that in the future there won't be that many more small towns. Like, you know, cities will sprawl, and maybe, you know, there won't be these little pockets of small town mentality. I don't know.
Well, that
depending on
mentality
where.
will still exist in cities.
Just in big cities.
I just want to point out that I don't think it's necessarily wrong for cousins to marry either. I
Well.
think go right ahead.
All right,
I didn't know if you
Don't worry, Shandine.
and with that, we will take a break.